Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rahakwadash, and double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who rule well and push this word in truth and in sincerity. Peace and salutations to the hopeful elect pushing this word across the four corners of the earth, and to the sincere Akwathium that are listening and learning in silence in these last days. It's your brother Yadai from the DC Church, and Lord's will. This video will be edifying, short, and straight to the point. And I'm going to entitle this video, Making the Mark Attractive. Now, when I'm talking about the mark, we're talking about the MOTB, the mark of the beast, which we know to be the RFID microchip. Now, the reason why I want to entitle it Making the Mark Attractive is because when they first come out with it, it's not going to be something that's labeled, hey, this is the mark of the beast. Because if it were so, people who truly believe obviously wouldn't be fooled. And there is no temptation that would make you have to take it because no matter what, you're going to look at it and be like, you know what? I already know that's the mark of the beast, so I'm not going to take it. But the Lord has put the spirit upon specific men to understand this prophecy and what it is. Okay. And the times that we're living in, you can see that all paths lead to the MOTB. Okay. Because what does that do? That promotes their new world order and total control. And as I was reading this article, it was saying about 50% of the public would be willing to accept palm scan payments because it focuses on speed, convenience, and hygiene. And when you look at hygiene, it's talking about avoiding shared surfaces, and that would be due to the pestilences that you see popping up out the woodworks. All right, but also improve security. You'll be seeing a lot of data breaches and personal information being sold. Okay. But real quick, before I start with this scripture, I want to get the article that I had pulled up right here because it's talking about the biometric updates. But I'm only going to read through a couple parts that I want to get to. Bear with me a bit while I find it. Actually, yeah, I'm going to start from these two right here, and I'm going to go down to the last couple paragraphs. But if you read the top right here, it says almost 50% of U.S. consumers would use Palm biometric payments, research finds. And when you look at the research, it more so caters to the younger audience because they're more accepting to the new technology that's being put out. But the older audience have been around for some time, so they don't like the changes that they see. But there are some older audience that would actually, adapt to the new technology that's being put out there. But it says consumers are signaling that speed, convenience, and hygiene will define the future of payments. But trust is the tipping point. It says Oscars Levisic, Laxevics, Salaki if I said that wrong, but Chief Revenue Officer Handwave. When people are confident that their data is handled securely, so that goes to the security, right? Half of all shoppers say they would use Palm payments regularly. What we're seeing is the emergence of new payment culture, intuitive, contact free, and built around the individual. Now, when you scroll down here, I'm going to say here, and then read the rest. It says fear of data breaches tops the list, with 55% saying it is their primary concern. Broader skepticism about data use is also evident. Nearly 6 to 10 Americans refuse to share their email address at checkout. So you see how data breaches and security, that's a thing that people are concerned about. And only 38% trust tech companies to manage to manage face biometric data responsibility. Even so, early signs of adaptation are emerging. More than half of respondents in Miami and New York say they would feel comfortable paying with their palm, and 1 in 10 shoppers in Las Vegas report that they are already using biometric payments. Speed and convenience are key motivators, with 34% citing faster checkout, 36% pointing to improved security, and a quarter saying they like the ability to leave their wallet or phone behind, so you're carrying a lot less. A minimalist type of mindset, right? That even sounds attractive to me, right? Using the digital system and all that. But when it comes down to putting that RFID microchip into your hand or your forehead, that's where the no is. That's where the buck stops. Lord willing, that spirit is on me to resist the hour of temptation. All right. But hygiene is also top of mind. Is also top of mind as 61% say avoiding shared surfaces is a priority. And if you look at the time that we're living in right now, again, pestilence is jumping off the page. Okay. It says the survey suggests Palm-based payments are still in their early stages, but edging towards wider acceptance, particularly as younger consumers expect seamless contact-free experiences. Now, take this with a grain of salt. I came across a video. I'm gonna do more research on it, but it says that this infrastructure with AI, CBDCs, and things like that is set to be launched December 17th this year. But take that with a grain of salt. Don't take it as word of the gospel. You know what I'm saying? Let me do more research on that and I get back to you on that. But we know it's definitely coming soon. Otherwise, these infrastructures wouldn't be set up, let alone even the smart dust system that Wells Fargo patent for biometric payment verifications. Okay. But I want to jump here to Revelation. Actually, let me start from Matthew 24. And I'm going to read right here and 6, and it says, "And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation," you see that now. Kingdom against kingdom, you see that now, but it's only going to get worse. "And there shall be famines." You see how the control of the food, how they're just starting to contaminate a lot of things, so people are starting to be skeptical on what to eat. But also, let's talk about the famine of the word that's going to be coming about too. Okay? Because there's going to come a point in time where the Lord is going to shut up the prophets to not really preach this word anymore. Okay, amongst each other, maybe keeping the precepts for yourself, but the videos are going on the highways and hedges. Wouldn't be doing that no more. Okay, and it says in pestilences, you can see that the new hantavirus you see in 2020, you see norovirus. You're starting to see all these things coming out the woodworks, right? Even over in Africa, the Ebola outbreak, earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Okay, now, all that is leading into what? Again, all paths lead to the MOTB. So here it goes, Revelation 13 and 16. "And he causeth all," meaning he's going to coerce you, feel like you have to, "both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or their foreheads. And that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name." So that is a device known as the RFID microchip that has to be implanted within you in order to participate in society. Okay. I would break down the words and everything like that, but for the sake of the lesson and the time, I'm gonna get right into it. Because what I did is that I went to Chat GPT and I started having a conversation, right? So I was asking it basically, okay, what would it look like to basically try to gradually implement this whole system? Basically, right? What kind of language would be used? What kind of tactics that would be used to make the people want to be compliant with it? Right? So I had a list of things because you got to understand this devil is never going to come outright and say he's trying to deceive you or hurt you. Hey, here's the MOTB, as I said before. It will always be disguised as something that will be beneficial, convenient, or profitable unto you. That's exactly how the serpent beguiled Eve in the garden. So let me actually get that first in Genesis 3 and 1. "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden?" All right. Now let me go to 2 Corinthians 11. Yeah, and 3. It says, "But I fear lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety," all right, that means his craftiness, his cunningness. And in other words, you can look at his false wisdom because what he's saying isn't true. Okay. So your minds should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Hamashiach Yahweh. Okay. Because following the ways of Yahweh is simple, especially if you have the spirit upon you, if you're the elect, right? But it's just a stumbling block to others who don't have the spirit upon them. Okay. So remember this, what I just brought out throughout the entirety of this lesson, that the words that's going to be said to you is not going to be what it actually means. All right. So now let me go ahead and read what I got right here. It says, "If a government consortium of companies or a large institution wanted to make mandatory biometric payments, face scans, fingerprints, palm scans, iris recognition publicly acceptable, despite the strong resistance, the tactics you listed could realistically be applied like this." All right. So before I asked what were some tactics, and I just took a couple of those tactics that realistically happened and applied it to this lesson. If I took all of them, it'd probably be a little bit too long. It is a bit lengthy, but it's not wordy. So bear with me while I go through it. But it's saying that association with popular causes. So these are things that your common people would be concerned about. On another note, people are sheep. So they will go along just to get along just because it's popular, right? So the system would rarely be marketed as mandatory biometric financial tracking. Why? That doesn't sound very attractive to the people that want to receive it. So instead, messaging would connect it to emotionally popular goals like stopping fraud, protecting children and seniors from scams, financial inclusion. They go that word convenience again, faster disaster relief, public health safety, anti terror financing, and climate efficient cashless infrastructure. Okay. So it says the biometric system becomes framed as a tool for safety and progress rather than surveillance or control. Okay. So an example of that will be no more stolen wallets, identity theft, or card fraud. Why? Because you're now secure with a chip in your body, right? Anyways, even if the deeper issue is centralized identity linked commerce, all right, here's two: celebrity or influencer endorsement. Now, this is a big one because people will follow their favorite celebrity or a basketball player, a football player, a music artist more. They will even learn about themselves, especially more than they will even know about Yahweh Bashmi Yahweh. Why? Because they're of the world. But this is a big one. So public figures would demonstrate the system casually and enthusiastically, like, oh, this really works, man. You should do this. I don't know why nobody's not doing it, especially if that's your favorite player. So athletes paying with a palm scan at stadiums, they can even show that on commercials. Tech influencers praising frictionless living. A lot of people don't like a whole bunch of resistance to how they're living. They want smooth sailing. Celebrities using it at charity galas, finance creators calling cash outdated. So the goal is normalization through aspiration, right? So successful modern people will use this, not you are surrendering anonymity in transactions. Okay. Now, these are your common people that will be concerned about, right? Because when you look at those things, for example, 2020, when the jab came out, you seen NFL stars on commercials saying they would take it, aka Travis Kelsey. You even see NBA stars like LeBron James. You see your favorite music artist or your actress, et cetera, et cetera. People that you are fans of that you follow dearly. You see them doing it and you see they got this kind of life. Why shouldn't I? Right? Now let's go on to the next one. Selective storytelling. Now the media does this very well. See, this is why you also want the real news and have to look outside from where you are. Because in this case, US, they're going to lie to you about everything, especially pertaining to the war, especially pertaining to the small hats, and even the jab, the benefits of it, and all kinds of things. I mean, the truth will be out there if you're searching for it. But if you're not looking for it, you're lazily just going to take whatever they say to you. Okay? They'll use stories that's going to trigger your heartstrings to make you empathize with the situation and accept it. Right? So when it goes to selective storytelling, as it's written right here, they have campaigns that would heavily feature edge cases where biometrics would solve emotionally powerful problems. Dementia patients safely buying groceries. They even have Elon Musk with that Neuralink chip, to help people to be able to walk, the paralyzed to be able to walk, the blind to be able to see, trying to basically simulate the same miracles that Yahweh Shai would be able to heal. Okay. A trafficking victim recovering identity access. Hey, that's a big one considering these files and the lack of transparency of that has been put out there. People would love to see that their children are safe and not falling victim to situations like this. Disaster victims accessing emergency funds without documents, fraud victims protected by biometrics. Meanwhile, those things are going to be said to you, but then less attention will be given to data breaches, right? Irreversible biometric theft, surveillance expansion, false positives, exclusion errors, political abuse and potential, and also dependence on centralized infrastructure. So that makes it harder to opt out. But I'm gonna get to that later. But the emotional examples become the public mental model. Man, you see how it helped this person, right? Okay. So that's how they're gonna use it. But it's selective storytelling. They're not gonna tell you the bad parts that come with it. Like Revelation 14 and 9, down to 11, if you do receive that mark, right? But they also have normalization through repetition. That's also a big one as well because you see it enough, you start to think it's the norm. They do this through media, TV, music, social media, etc. Right? But it says you'd likely see biometric payment systems appear everywhere gradually. Airports, Whole Foods, I've seen it already. Concert venues, gyms, schools, transit systems, cafes, workplace cafeterias. Even in Silver Spring, they had a movie theater that was cashless. Okay. Then in entertainment, like TV shows, like I said, commercials, movies, influencer vlogs, right? Because influencers have big followings. So if you see streamers or other people that looks like they sold their soul, so to speak, took the bag, now you see why they're starting to put things out too, because they have a huge following. If you have a huge following and influence, then they're going to want you to follow their program to mislead the people. Okay. So that's repeated exposure. And what does that do? It reduces the psychological sense of abnormality. Now it seems normal. So a decade later, younger generations may view cash or anonymous payment as suspicious or archaic simply because they grew up surrounded by biometric authentication, right? So how you grow up, when you grow up, it matters because you're not going to be able to see things in history. All right. All you're going to be able to do is be able to research, read, and go by what somebody told you. Okay. Well, that's why the Lord put prophets out there to be able to give you a warning to watch for these things. Okay. Now it also goes into framing opponents as extreme. Who do you think they're talking about? You know, the prophets are the ones that expose this devil and his plans. Okay. So the critics could be portrayed as conspiracy theorists, anti-technology, protecting animals, selfish about public safety, standing in the way of anti-fraud efforts. A more sophisticated messaging would avoid directly attacking ordinary skeptics and instead isolate the strongest dissenters publicly. So a common strategy they will use is merge legitimate privacy concerns with fringe rhetoric. So all opposition appears irrational. All right. Now, what is this fringe rhetoric that it talks about? I had it pulled up just to make sure I understand the terminology. But fringe rhetoric refers to extreme, alternative, or unsubstantiated viewpoints. Okay, so often like conspiracy theories or paranormal claims, so forth and so on. Essentially, what we're doing, you know? But because we're going to look like fools to the world, you know? But I'd rather be a fool for Yahweh Shem Yahweh sake, okay? But that's how these things are going to be portrayed as, okay? Let me see. All right, but yeah, like it says, it's going to discourage the moderate public criticism. All right. Now I want to get Second Corinthians 2 and read verse 11. It says, "Lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices." So the reason why I want to bring this out is because this devil has to label us as extremists, so it deems us as not a credible source to follow. Right. But we're not ignorant of Satan and his devices and his wicked plans. That's why what he does, we're able to point out and we're able to warn the people. But that's what make us a prey. Okay. The Lord is not going to leave us ignorant. He's not going to keep us in the dark. We're the children of light. That's why we're not walking in darkness, meaning we're not walking not circumspectly, not looking around. You know, we're called to be watchmen, right? To look for the signs and see what's going on so we can tell that end times are coming. And as you can see, it's here, man. All right. But let me go back over here. It's a little bit more. I think this is the last one I have right here. But I got a little bonus because I asked, okay, so how would these same tactics be applied to the RFID microchip? And it says the same way, but it got more descriptive on how to apply to get people to want to be compliant to the chip. Okay. But it also says appeals to fear or crisis. Okay. Now, what is that? In short, they create order out of chaos. You know, the chaos is basically orchestrated to usher in their new world order. But first, they need a reason to implement it. And the reasons given are going to be said using deceitful language. Okay. It's called language engineering. But, you know, the fact that this system has so many holes in it is the reason why it has to collapse, right? That's their reason for it. And the major reason is because prophecy must be fulfilled ultimately. Okay, that's why the system is collapsing and coming down before they actually try to instate or reinstate or put in, I should say, the MOTB system. Okay, but the key term is language strongly shapes the public emotional reaction. That's what language engineering does. So how they say certain things does matter. Okay, so here it says what? This is historically one of the most powerful accelerants for public acceptance of surveillance or control systems. A major catalyst could be cybercrime waves. They're already talking about that. They're talking about identity thefts, epidemics, already talking about that. Terrorism financing, already talking about that. Banking instability, you already see about that, how things are going down. People selling their shares in certain banks. Even Warren Buffett, I believe it was the Bank of America. All right. AI generated fraud. You see that all over social media. Okay. Now, when somebody points something out, they can be like, man, that was AI, just to say it was fake. And they call it deep fake impersonations. Pandemic requiring contactless verification. Again, the pestilences have been spread, right? So now when they say those things, the message becomes traditional authentication is no longer safe. Now they have a reason to implement that system. Okay. Or the old system cannot protect society anymore. So when crisis environments, populations often accept measures they would reject under normal conditions. They be like, man, F it, man. If anything, to get out of here, you know? So the additional realistic tactics, voluntary before mandatory. So systems are often introduced as optional. Faster checkout lanes, discounts, rewards, exclusive access. And you see all those things now, even with your credit cards and the money that you're spending and into grocery stores and stuff like that as well, right? But it says then non-users experience inconvenience, so people don't want to participate in this system are going to get some they're going to feel like it's a hard time to live, man. You're going to be put in dire straits, But that's what it means to enter ye at the straight gate. Not going to receive that mark, but the Lord is going to be your refuge. He's going to look out for you. He's going to feed you. He's going to make sure you eat. He's going to make sure you drink. He's going to make sure you survive if you're one of his, okay? But legacy systems shrink and opting out becomes economically or socially impractical. Why? Because receiving that mark is the only way to actually participate and spend money in society. Okay. So formal mandates may become unnecessary because participation becomes de facto required, meaning it's the new standard. We don't have to make it law, but which is going to happen, but it becomes de facto required because again, they see everybody else doing it. Again, sheep follow, right? They're going to just go along just to get along. So this is where I've mentioned the language engineering. So the term pi- biometric payment mandate would never likely be emphasized. All right. But more acceptable language. And we see this through articles and things that we read all the time, even in the language, even in the article I just pulled out at the beginning of the lesson. It talks about secure identity verification, trusted digital commerce, seamless authentication, smart payments, unified identity access. Okay. So language strongly shapes public emotional reaction. So the core strategic principle is that most persuasion campaigns do not try to directly convince people surveillance is good. You're not going to hear that. Instead, they're going to shift the emotional frame towards safety. There that go where to go again. Inconvenience, inevitability, modernity, and social responsibility while making resistance appear like it's inconvenient, paranoid, outdated, antisocial, and dangerous. Those are going to be trigger words to X out anybody else doesn't go along with this system. Okay. But that pattern has appeared repeatedly in public campaigns around technology, security policy, and data collection throughout modern history. And you can see it now. Okay. Now, speaking on those things, because I see safety, I see convenience. All right. I see that he's going to be using deceitful language. So I want to get a couple of precepts before I pull out that bonus that I had that I'm going to close out. Salaki, if it's a bit long, just bear with me. But First Thessalonians 5:3 says, for when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, for they shall not escape. So that peace and safety, when those things are out, and everybody's going to feel like, okay, yeah, society's going back to normal again. No, 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 no. Okay. But verse 4 says, but ye, brethren, are not in darkness. That's what I was saying before, because the Lord has given us the knowledge to be able to see these things. That's why we're not ignorant of Satan's devices. It says that that day should overtake you as a thief. Ye are all the children of light, and that the children of the day, we are not of the darkness. We not of the night, nor of the darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep, as do others, but let us watch and be sober. For they that sleep, sleep in the night, and they that be drunken in the night. Okay, but let us who are of the day be sober, putting on a breastplate of love, of faith, and love, and for an helmet of hope, and for an helmet the hope of salvation. Okay. But because of that, because of all those things, that's the reason why the Lord has us to be able to see this plan. One, to warn our people, to tell our people, the elect, so to speak, to turn back and to be not ignorant of his devices so you know how to move accordingly when these things come to pass. Okay. Now I want to get Psalms 55 and verse 21. It says the words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. So that's that deceitful language I'm talking about. Okay. He preaches things that sound good to the public, but all these things that he's preaching is just leading us to death. Okay. His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords. Cast thy burden upon the Lord Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai, and he shall sustain thee. Don't rely on a shadow of Egypt like it talks about in Isaiah 30, because that's what the rebellious children would do. Okay? We're going to rely on Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. Why? Because he will sustain thee. He shall never suffer the righteous to be moved. Verse 23, but thou, O power, shall bring them down into the pit of destruction. Bloody and deceitful men shall not live out half their days, but I will trust in thee. Why? Because they have an appointed time, right? The Lord has a time for when they're going to be destroyed. Just got to be patient and wait for it, okay? That's the patience of the saints, all right? Now, this next one I'm going to read, I'm going to just read straight through and just bear with me. Again, it's lengthy, but not really that much wordy. Okay, because it's giving you bullet points to break it down. But after this, I'm gonna close out. All right. But it says rebranding would likely be one of the central tactics because the raw phase mandatory biometric payments triggers immediate concerns about surveillance, bodily autonomy, centralized control, privacy laws, exclusion, and permanence of biometric data. Okay, so the strategy would be to linguistically and visually detach the system from those associations. All right. Because if you hear those terms, then you're automatically going to think, okay, avoid that. So now, how can we try to trick you, manipulate your mind to make you think that you're not receiving those things, even though you are? All right. So there is a list of things right here that I got. So here's how that commonly works in large scale public persuasion efforts. One, they renamed the system around benefits, not mechanics, not mechanisms. Instead of emphasizing biometrics, tracking, identity enforcement, the brand would emphasize ease, trust, speed, safety, and inclusion. An example of possible, it says examples, oh yeah, examples of possible branding styles: a secure pass, one ID, smart pay, trusted access, unified wallet, digital trust network, citizen wallet, instant identity, safe touch, verified pay. Don't forget about real ID. You're talking about your driver's license basically has to be digital. You can even look in over in Europe, they're talking about digital IDs to be able to work and things like that. They're using language like, "Oh no, it just makes it easier," but we know where it's going. Notice how none of those names highlight your body is now payment credential. Okay, the mechanism disappears behind emotionally positive language, so they're going to change the language, almost like rebranding. Okay, two, replace threatening words with soft technical language. There I go. What did I say? Words are smoother than butter, but is war in his heart. Smoother than oil, but it's drawn swords. This is one of the oldest public relation tactics. Okay. So instead of surveillance, you're saying monitoring. Instead of tracking, you're saying verification. Instead of saying biometric database, you're saying secure identity vault. Instead of saying mandatory, you're saying default enrollment. Data harvesting, no, you're going to say personalization. And we see a lot of that when it comes down to social media. Okay. Make it more personalized to you, even with come to the economics when it comes to spending. Let's see what you look at. Why? If you pay attention to that long enough, now I know what you like. I'm gonna put that in front of you for as an ad or a commercial, and then you can go out and buy those things. That's how they're gonna sell it as. But really, it's just invasion of your privacy. Centralized identity. So it's interoperability. I'm not even gonna act like I know what that is, but we know that's centralized identity. All right. But the purpose is not necessarily to lie outright, but to reduce instinctive resistance. So what you instinctually know would be wrong, because of those positive words and the deceitful languages, now you start to think differently. You think it's right for you now. So words shape emotional response before people even evaluate policy details. Shifts focus from control to convenience. Now we know they want total control, but what they're going to sell you is convenience, safety, and all those other things that they're going to be listing. So the campaign emphasis would likely avoid discussing mandatory participation, but we know that's coming. Permanent identifiers, state corporate access, or inability to vote biometrics. So instead, message becomes, hey, no wallets needed. You ain't gonna forget your password no more. You ain't gotta wait in line. Just walk out, one scan, and done. Okay. Now that sounds pretty good, right? Convenience is psychologically powerful because people often trade abstract, long-term concerns for immediate friction reduction. Again, you want life to be smooth and coasting. Four, make it feel inevitable and modern. Rebranding often works by attaching something controversial to the identity of the future. Messaging themes like next generation commerce, future ready payments, smart infrastructure. Hey, hold on. Just because it mentioned that, look at this right here, the smart dust that I mentioned. All right, for biometric payment verification, smart dust are microscopic intelligent particles that sit on the scan and continuously authenticate your identity using biometric signals. All right. This is what it looked like. That's the particle. Let me go back to where I was at. Where was he? Okay. But make it feel inevitable and modern. Okay. So rebranding often works by attaching something controversial to the identity of the future. Y'all read that one? So the implied psychological pressure is what? Resistance is being left behind, right? This is especially effective on institutions, businesses, and younger demographics. Okay. Dissolve the boundary between authentication and payment. So instead of presenting your body as becoming your financial key, the system may be framed as digital identity. You already see the stepping stones that's building up to that, the building blocks. Secure access and universal authentication. So payment becomes just one feature among many. Transit access, where I'm at. Yeah, transit access, healthcare login, school entry, airport verification, government services. So that goes back to when we look at the mark as that word grapho, where it's going to be able to keep your record of all your things. Okay. Now that when you read this, it makes sense now when they want to have all that put into the RFID microchip. But this broad integration makes the payment aspect feel less exceptional. Six, borrow the aesthetics of wellness and simplicity. So visual branding matters enormously. They even do this in food and the grocery stores with bright colors, the way the font is, the name and the title. All those things may sound attractive, which may make you get it, right? So it says visual branding matters enormously, like imagery, soft blue, green color palettes, smiling families, the sad music or even happy music to make it seem like this is something that's you should be doing clean minimalist interfaces, elderly people using it effortlessly, because as the elderly grow up and the technology starts to get developed, they start to get more unfamiliar with it and wants to go back to the old ways. But if elderly can use it easily, then it must be easy to use, no problems. Again, it goes to that frictionless life. But disabled people benefiting from accessibility, then it goes diverse groups interacting harmoniously. See, triggering your heartstrings with sad stories, becoming happy stories, right? But now it says very little imagery would emphasize scanners, enforcement, databases, service, and state authority. The emotional atmosphere matters more than technical details and mass persuasion. Seven, I'm almost done, so bear with me. Introduce through premium experiences first. So rebranding often starts with aspiration. Examples, VIP airport lanes, because everybody wants a luxury life, right? To live that good life, comfortable life. Luxury retail, sports arenas, tech conferences, frictionless cafes. This builds prestige before normalization. Once associated with status and convenience, resistance weakens. Because again, everybody wants that luxurious lifestyle. Eight, turn resistance into resistance to progress. So eventually the language may subtly, who was more subtle? Okay, talking about the serpent, that's how he beguiled Eve. He's speaking that same language now. Language may subtly evolve from this is an option to why would anyone oppose safer, smarter systems? Make you look like the bad guy for not doing it. Just like how they made people look like the bad guy for not receiving a jab, but now they all looking stupid. Okay. So at this point, critics are no longer debating a technology, they are framed as obstructing. So now, if you don't want to receive a jab, if you don't want to receive the mark, now if you don't want to participate in the society, you're obstructing efficiency, anti fraud efforts, modernization, accessibility, and public safety. That's how you're going to be framed. That framing is often important than the technology itself. Why? Because they're not even focused on the technology. Now they focused on you and saying, man, you're preventing us from having a better life. All right. So when you're affecting someone's bottom line in their life, now they want to come after you. Okay. So the underlying psychological goal is basically a successful rebrand change the public mental category. So instead of intrusive biometric control system, people begin thinking normal digital infrastructure. So that shift is usually gradual. Let's see, where was I at? Yeah, that shift is usually gradual, emotional, repetitive, and language driven more than openly argumentative. Okay. So I understand. Now apply this to the RFID microchip. Okay. So rebranding the implant, same kind of format. Okay. Sounds evasive, mechanical, and permanent, but what do? They will avoid words like chip, implant, tracker, RFID, embedded device. And who says those words, I wonder? It's talking about us. And instead, they use softer terms like digital key, smart implant, secure credential, wearable under skin, bio access device, personal authentication, and seamless identity. Okay, the technology gets linguistically refrained from machine inserted to body to convenient personal interface. Association with popular causes, we already did that. So you see that they're using the same reasons, but now they're applying it to people if they have received a chip. Helping Alzheimer's, again, triggering heartstrings, emergency medical identification, locating missing children, identity theft, so forth and so on, right? Celebrity and influencer normalization. How many people are going to receive that chip? And then, based on people saying that, now they're going to want to do that. Storytelling. A chip saved this patient's life. A worker entered secure areas without passwords. And then less attention would typically go towards coercion concerns. But that's what's going to happen. You're going to feel coerced to take it. They're going to take away things until you receive it, then they'll give it to you, if even that. Workplace pressure. Again, how many people on your job are asking you receive the shot? Or you can get fired. Surveillance capability, hacking risks, so forth and so on. Normalization through gradual exposure. In short, the more people that get it, the more people are going to follow along. Appeals to fear or crisis. Again, order out of chaos. They just need a reason to implement that new system. And they have to have that chaos to happen so they can create order. Okay? Destruction, then creation. Seven, framing critics as extreme. Anybody speaking out against what they're trying to accomplish, they're extremist. Eight, voluntary systems becoming functional mandatory. Okay. So now these systems that are voluntary, now they're going to be mandated because enough of the public have gotten it done already. Okay. So formal legal mandates may never occur. Instead, implant users get faster access, better convenience. So speed, hygienic, convenience, all those things are still being used in security. Now, non-users are going to face delays, repeated verification, extra paperwork, limited compatibility. So over time, optional can become socially and economically coercive without explicit force. Okay, just take away the things you need in your life. Turning identity into infrastructure. So the implant would likely stop being marked as a device. Instead, it's framed as you. This is you. Sounds like back what Hitler did. When people were named as numbers. Rather than who they actually are. But who am I to say that, right? 10, aesthetics and emotional engineering. Public campaigns were likely to avoid imagery associated with surgery, needle cyberpunk dystopias, and surveillance states. Instead, minimalist Scandinavian style, some neutral colors, bright. Things look clean, minimalist type of style. Calm interfaces, wellness aesthetics, smiling families, so forth and so on. Okay. So I'm gonna just get this core pattern and I'm gonna close out. But it's saying the central persuasion strategy would not usually be give up bodily privacy. It would more likely be this solves problems you already fear while making life easier. That's how controversial technologies are often socially integrated by normalizing gradually, as a gradual thing where you don't even notice that it's happening sometimes if you're not paying attention. Associate with benefits, okay? They don't even mention the detrimental things, just like they do in medicine. They just talked about the benefits, but really not the side effects that happens with it. Okay. Reduce emotional resistance, make alternatives feel outdated or inconvenient, frame adoption as progress and safety rather than control. So whether such systems are ultimately beneficial, harmful, or mixed depends heavily on governance, legal safeguards, consent standards, data ownership, abuse prevention, ability to opt out, and transparency of power structures around them. And we know we don't have that. And yet, once you get it, there is no way out. If you receive that mark, there is no repentance for you. Okay. So it's good that you know these things, and hopefully, what we just read wasn't too much. It made sense and it was edifying to the flock. But again, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rachakwadash, and double honors to the elders and apostles of the great millstone who rule well. Till next one. Shalom.